Hello, everyone, and welcome to the April edition of Techspert Talks. I'm Troy Rainey, and I'll be your host for today's session. Today's presentation is Migrating Qlik Client Managed with our own Sebastian Linzer. Sebastian, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hello, my name is Sebastian Linzer. I'm a principal technical engineer at Qlik Support. My main focus there is Qlik Client Managed, and I have been around with Qlik Support for 7 years now.
Great. Today, Sebastian is going to be talking us through the whole process from start to finish when it comes to migrating Qlik implementation from one environment to another. We're going to go through the whole backup process. He's going to demo that migration process. We're going to talk about certificates and highlight some best practices and things to be aware of. Sebastian, what are we going to be demonstrating today in detail?
So we want to demonstrate how you migrate a Qlik client managed installation from one PC to another. So in our case, we have the scenario that we have a physical machine we need to get rid of, and we need to put it on a virtualized machine.
Okay, and we're going from the same operating system in both machines?
Yes, in our case, Windows Server 2019.
So basically, when everything is finished, we should have the same apps, same tasks, everything running, but on different hardware once we get finished.
Yes, that's the idea.
Great. Can you share a little bit about your setup?
Yeah, I do have a standalone database on a server called Qlik Server 3. You can see it here in the services list. We do have a Postgres service. Right now it's Postgres 14.
Okay, so this is the repository database storing all the settings for this implementation, and it's on its own machine.
Exactly. And when we check in pgadmin, the standard QlikSense databases, licenses, QSMQ, QSR, and Sense services exist. And we can also see that we have the standard user QlikSense repository down here.
Okay. And that's pretty much staying the same, right?
Yes, we will still stay in 14, but we have to do some minor adjustments to the database, which I will talk about later.
Okay. So where do we start with this whole migration process?
We start by connecting to the central node. I only have a one node system here.
Okay, so this is the physical machine where we're starting from.
Yes. This here is our central node. I have one app and I have the monitoring apps, so it's not.
Yeah, it's a pretty simple implementation, but that's fine for demo purposes.
And we are on the February 2024 initial release.
All right.
When we scroll down here to service cluster, we do have a share, which basically serves as the share for QlikSense.
Okay, so the apps and log files are in a separate machine in a share drive, and they're staying put.
Exactly.
Now, what are the requirements for the machine we'll be migrating to?
You have to make sure you fit all the requirement checks. Windows Server 2016, 19, or 22. You can use Windows 10 and 11, but it's not recommended to use in production.
And that's really just because it hasn't been thoroughly tested yet, right?
Yes.
Okay.
The processor supporting AVX, at least if you want to use natural language.
Right.
At least 5 gig of disk space, while I would say you should have more than 5 free before.
That's bare minimum.
An SMB share, important .NET 4.8.
With .NET, can't you just have a later version installed instead?
You can have this installed as well, but you do need to install 4.8. And
right.
It will not work if you only install 6. It's okay to have multiple .NET versions.
Yeah.
You see, we used a 14 database on the second server.
Right.
We would also be able to use a 13 or 12 if we have it as a standalone, but you should not use the 12.5 bundled anymore because it has a couple of security vulnerabilities which you want to upgrade away from.
Yeah, there's a lot of material out there about that.
And important is there is no Internet Explorer support anymore.
Oh, yeah, TLS
is at the moment at 1.2. So if you have Windows Server 2022 and you could potentially enable TLS 1.3, for the moment, please do not. It's not yet fully TLS 1.3 compliant.
Oh, it's good to be aware of. All right, so assuming we've got all of those prerequisites taken care of, especially making sure we got .NET 4.8 installed, what is the first step?
So the first step now is to shut down QlikSense. I have a standalone system, so I do not have the QlikSense repository database service. My database is on Qlik Server 3. Then we have the service dispatcher, which we need to stop at the end.
Okay, now the QlikSense is stopped. Is it time to back up?
Yes. Up first, we open the MMC to back up our certificates. We click here on File, Add Remove Snap-in, Certificates, Add My User Account. So you want to be logged in as the service user, and then you want to get the personal account of the service user plus the computer account.
Ah,
If you
okay.
at this point here have any restrictions, then please ask your IT to help you out.
Just want to clarify, the service user is the account that's actually running the QlikSense services, right?
Yes, and you can see it here. So if you double click on the service and you go on the log on tab, you can
There
find
it is.
And we are logged in as domain administrator. So
Thanks.
now we do have the Qlik client certificate under current user personal certificates. We would right click, all tasks, export. We say yes with the private key, then all extended properties. We don't need the certification pass. Next,
Okay.
we set a password.
This is a password just for the exported package?
That is just for the key so that not everybody can just import the key again. Then put it on the desktop. And now we call this one current user Qlik client.
That's a good practice, so you know where to import it again.
Now we need to go to local computer, and all Qlik issued certificates are issued by your server name under the installation -CA at the end.
Cool.
So here we have two. We have Qlik Server 1 and Qlik Service Cluster, and export it with all the properties. Okay, password again. Now,
And you're just creating a password when you type that in?
yes, I use 1, 2, 3 for simplicity here. So we call this one here local computer personal server.
Okay.
Finish.
And I see just repeat the process for all those Qlik certificates.
Yes. This cluster.
All right.
And now there is one more, which is under trusted root. You just press the letter of the server name, like in my case, it's Q, and you jump right into the list.
Okay.
You see that this one has a private key attached in front. We have this little key icon. So we do want to have the private key exported here as well.
So these checkboxes are really critical.
Let's call
Trusted root.
So we are done for the MMC part here.
All right, we've got all the certificates exported. What's next?
Next, if you have your Qlik Share locally on the disk, you would back up this one and move it over to the new machine. Okay. In our case, we have it external, so we can skip that step. Then we have the database.
Yeah, we've got those 4 databases: license, QSMQ, QSR, and Sense services. What does the documentation say about this?
We see here we would take backup of all the databases we have for that installation.
Okay, this is listing all these commands to run through a command prompt?
Yes. So if you would have the embedded database, you would run it from program files, QlikSense repository Postgres. If you have, as me, a standalone database, then it's usually wherever you have installed it. So the standard path is program files, Postgres, and database version and bin. Then you can copy the file path.
Great.
Open a CMD prompt as admin. CD that. And now the first database is to dump the QSR. Export the QSR database. The user for the export will be Postgres. So we have to enter the Postgres password. And then the file QSR backup should be created in the C drive.
And there it is. So just repeat for all the databases using the commands from the documentation. Is there a simpler method?
Yes. If you do have a standalone database, you have a second way. You go into properties here and you just rename to licenses to QSMQ2.
Okay, so by renaming, you're basically breaking the connection to the old system.
So I will create fresh databases right after that step. Installation on the second machine into a fresh database. And at the end, I just rename, so the new system will talk to the old databases, but I skipped the whole import-export step.
Ah, this definitely seems like a easier way to do it.
The first database called licenses, and then select the user QlikSense repository. We go to the definition. Here it's important to select template 0. We now repeat this step for all the other databases. QSNQ, QlikSense repository. The QlikSense installer will not create databases in a standalone instance. If you are standalone, you have to create those databases up front, and that is why we walk through that process together.
Okay, so you're just creating databases with the exact same name.
Exactly. Now we have completely fresh databases set up.
Great. What's the name of the machine in our new environment?
So that one is a complete fresh machine, Qlik Server 2. We have to start with the MMC. So right now we're on the new server where we don't have any certificate yet, but we need to store the certificates before we install so that it uses those certificates during the installation.
Okay, so that's the first step before we even install.
Yes.
So the plan then is to take all those certificates that you exported previously and import them to this machine.
Yes. We go to current user personal and we import the certificate now. We browse instance cert. We have to change this here to PFX. And then we see here current user Qlik client. So we open this one up. Now it gets imported. You type the password. You do not check the enable strong key protection feature. You need to select the box, mark this key as exportable, and you want to include all the extended properties. Next, already in the store, and we select finish.
All right.
See now it created certificates, and we do have a Qlik client. It will still say Qlik Server 1, which is normal because we import the old certificate from the old server, even if we are now on Qlik Server 2.
Okay.
Now we go to the local computer personal, and we do the same thing. Import PFX. Say it should be exportable. Finish. We can check. Now we have the Qlik service cluster, and we take one more. So now when we double click on one of those certificates, we see, yes, it has the private key, but it says, I don't have enough information to verify this certificate. And yes, the certificate path isn't there because we didn't put the root certificate in. So we go to trusted root, certificates, right click here, all tasks, import, PFX, trusted root, same throw here, and finish. Refresh once in this list. We do have the Qlik Server 1.
So now I guess we get the installer from Qlik Community Product Downloads page.
Yeah, we can say latest release and patch, and we know that we need February 2024, Qlik Sense Enterprise on Windows. We have the setup exe and the last patch. Now we have downloaded our files. Make sure that the unblock box is checked. Every time it comes from the internet, you might see the unblock, you might not see it. It's depending on your IT policies. You right click here and you say run as an administrator. We will on purpose open Task Manager just to show there is really no Qlik service installed here on this machine.
Okay.
We always get those kind of warnings messages. Your MMC is open, your Task Manager is open. Please close it before proceeding. We close the MMC. The warnings go away. You can now hit. Sometimes it still says it's running. Then the trick there is you check here the users pane, and you might see another user logged on the server.
Okay, it's a good thing to be aware of.
In our case, we close the Task Manager now again, and we hit next. Install, accept the license agreement. Since we are installing a new central node, we create a cluster. We leave the name as it is, Qlik Server 2 domain local.
And is that just the name of the machine?
Yes, that's the name of the machine. We do have the option to get a new database created. That would be the embedded database option.
Okay.
And we have the second option to connect to an existing database. Since we know our database is on Qlik Server 3, we use that option. Standard port for QlikSense 4432, or whatever your admin tells you, you can change it to. Database user password.
That all-important password.
Now it will try to connect to the databases. As you see, it could. If it couldn't connect, or one of the databases here would be missing, you would get an error message.
Okay. But it actually created a connection to those fresh new databases that you created yourself with exact names.
Exactly.
Okay.
In this one here, you have a couple of additional settings. Leave them default, point to the root folder. In our case, we make it simple. The root folder never changed, which is the root folder, apps, archived logs, and static. And if we go from this machine to that one, they are here. They will not be overwritten during the installation, so all your apps be the same after the installation.
Is that a good step to kind of try to navigate to that location from this machine just to make sure?
Yeah, testing this upfront, given again you are logged in with the service user, is able to access the share from that server you are currently on.
Okay.
Now you choose the installation folder. And now, because we are migrating, we are unchecking this box. We want to change back to the other databases. And we hit next, and we will get the bundles customer agreement again, and we hit install.
So once this is finished, we still need to run that bootstrap command that changes the names from the old server name to the new one.
Yeah.
And test everything out. I like how it tells you what it's doing. All right, we are installed.
Good.
And you set it to leave the services unstarted, so everything is just waiting. What do we need to do next?
And the next step is to go back to the database machine. The QSR database is basically still empty because QlikSense hasn't started up, while the QSR2, which is our old database, that actually has all those tables already.
Okay, so we still need to take that step of restoring the old database to the new system.
Exactly. Now we rename this one to license 1, and now you see why I choose the 2 before, so I can keep them apart. But now we go back to the databases with number 2 and just rename those back to the original name. You could, of course, also delete the databases and rename them. I keep them here simply because of rollback purposes.
That's a great tip. I definitely believe in renaming instead of deleting. Is it time to start up the services on our new machine?
We need to start the first one, which is the Qlik Sense Service Dispatcher. And that one is the foundation for the repository to fully start up. So once that is done, we open a CMD prompt as admin. We need to navigate to a specific folder. And here we need to have the repository exe, which is this one.
Okay.
Copy that folder, go back to the command prompt, paste.
All right, so we're in that directory. What are we going to be doing here?
Yes, we are going to do a backup restore procedure. If we scroll, do something if your machine has a different host name. In our case, we had Qlik Server 1, and now we have Qlik Server 2.
Okay, so we have to go in and change the host name and all these settings.
And it says here, restore the certificates to secure the QlikSense services. We did that.
Okay.
Install QlikSense on the computer. We did that too. Start the repository service database. In our case, we have a standalone database, so that is already done.
So which step are we on?
There is this tiny bootstrap command.
Oh, we're on step 7, okay.
So we copy this one and we paste it here. You will see it immediately goes away, but then it should usually come back, setting up all the certificates to all the correct ports and so on.
All right, so that's going through and adjusting the certificates, adjusting entries in the database as well?
Yes.
It said Qlik Server 1, it's replacing it with Qlik Server 2.
Yeah, so in this case here, close that window. We restart the service dispatcher once to get the new certificate in place.
So can you clarify for me again what we're checking here?
The bootstrap command changed the name of the certificate now to Qlik Server 2. You see now?
It does.
It is Qlik Server 2 issued by Qlik Server 1. Now we start the repository as a service. We can also start the other services as a service.
Is it important to start the repository first?
Yes, the repository is the base service for all the others. Now the important thing is to watch that log file, the system repository.
I see it has an error contacting the license server.
Now, in that case, we first need to see if the license server is actually started up. It's always the one with the later timestamps. In this case, that one. It is actually started up to listen on port 92900, but it cannot communicate with the repository service.
Well, this is actually kind of great. We get to see how you would troubleshoot this. So you're opening up netstat to check the ports?
First, I want to see is port 9200 up, and that one is. Then I want to see is port 4242 up, and that one is not.
So there's some issue with the repository then.
Yes, one of the reasons. And
so would you just restart it, or what would you try?
That's a good question. We can try to stop it in any case. We should have a look at the firewall settings. Firewall is off, so that's not an issue.
Okay.
Then, so that here is most likely our problem. We did have one repository service still running, and that might have been our command line mode. So now let's start this one again.
There we go. So now 4242 is working.
It's at least sending something to it, but we still need to see if this thing starts up. So we need to go back to the repository system log.
Keep retrying.
So let's see if we...
All right, so we restart the dispatcher service. That tries to create that connection to the licensing server and check the log. All right, we got a new log file.
So see that the
listening on 9200.
And we see now all the files with the data are left. So the restart of the service dispatcher actually fixed it. The thing is started up. Now it actually says, I cannot get the other services.
Because they're not started.
Correct. And what we also can see is we see startup phase completed, which is the thing we want to see.
So now back to services.
We start all the other services up.
Okay, so the cause of this issue in this case was a command prompt that was keeping the repository service open. And once we stopped that and restarted the service dispatcher, things started to work as expected.
Exactly. And we might have to press Control-C and just closing the command prompt. Might have been holding back something for the license service to restart. Now we should have a couple of QlikSense icons, and we could, for example, open the management console. We should be able to use the same user as before, domain administrator.
Is it looking good so far?
This is working. So we see QlikSense February is up. The app list should show the app test 1.
All right, the same apps we had on the previous environment. That's good.
So now go to the hub. We have test 1 and we had the monitoring apps. That's exactly as we had it before. And we can open this app, which means our engine is working.
All right, that seems like a successful migration.
So what you now start is data load. You check, are my data connections all still valid and working? Are tasks working? Or do I get failed tasks and I have to investigate why is this not working on the new machine? Reasons for that is, for example, ODBC drivers, which you had on the old server, which you didn't install yet on the new server, but the app itself tries to connect to a standard ODBC driver.
Yeah, there could certainly be a few more details specific to each environment, but now let's move on to Q&A. Please submit your questions to the Q&A panel on the left-hand side of your ON24 console. We've already got a few questions coming in. I'll just read them from the top. All right, first question. After a migration, if work is accidentally continued on the old system, is there a way to migrate the additional work from the old environment to the new one, or what issues might that cause?
It could potentially cause some issues if they used an embedded database with QlikSense.
Okay.
You would have the database on the same machine as QlikSense is installed, and then we would have one database on ClickServer 1 and a second database on ClickServer 2. In our case here, we have both servers connecting to the database in ClickServer 3. So
that's right, it's a standalone.
Yes. You would get other problems because you potentially can't even start up. So they would have to re-migrate the database.
Okay. All right, next question. Is it possible to export and import multiple apps at once?
Yeah, import is, I think, still one by one.
Cool. Could you show us where to do that?
We do go to apps. And now you see you have a couple of them. So we can just go here. There is a more actions, export, export with data, and export.
Okay, so it's exporting all those apps you had highlighted in one bulk run.
Yes, it just puts them in a folder. You see the folder displayed here, C program data, QlikSense repository export. You see that was the export I started. And here are all my apps.
Very cool. Well, next question. How to apply a patch? Is this necessary on every node?
Of course, so if you have a multi-node system, you do need to apply a patch on every node. So your first step here is shut down all the sense services. It makes the
Okay.
installation of the patch much easier. I have
Okay.
prepared here a little Qlik Sense update, so we can run this one as administrator, which is the February 2024 patch 2 update. And here we are, patch successfully applied. Now we need to wait a little bit again, and then we should be able to open the QMC.
That was a pretty simple process.
Here we are. Now put your eyes on the bottom right. Qlik Sense February 2024 patch 2.
Great.
So,
Well, that was a pretty simple process, and we need to repeat that for every node in a multi-node system.
yes,
All right, well, let's move on to the next question. What if we need to upgrade Qlik Sense as well? Should we migrate first and then upgrade, or should we upgrade first and then migrate?
that's an interesting question. Of course, that might come up. You have to stay in certain boundaries. Never go from a 4-year-old Qlik Sense release to the latest one. But if you are 1 year back, for example, you want to migrate from February 2023 to February 2024, that is possible installing directly February 2024 and then just putting the database from February 2023 back. Just make sure
Okay.
never started up at the beginning. That's the most important step, to check the box of do not start the services after the installation.
Okay. It's nice to know that that's possible, but for best practice, would you suggest migrating first and then upgrading?
Yeah, I would go to the same version and then upgrade slowly to the next one.
Great. All right, move on to the next question. What are the prerequisites to migrate an app from on-prem to Qlik Cloud?
Okay. For this, we just open the QMC up again. If you have a signed license key, and we do have one in our system,
Uh-huh.
then you can set up a cloud deployment. So you have here the option cloud distribution. You will not get this if you have a left and control number, then you just simply don't see this option.
Okay.
In this setup, you can add your cloud tenant if you have one. If not, you can talk to your account manager.
Okay.
Some distribution policies, and you can then have a look at all the apps which are already in the cloud. So basically, the simplest rule is everything which gets reloaded on-prem and is published, you would push in a copy to the cloud as well.
Ah,
And then in your cloud tenant, you can assign some rules to say that this app always goes in a specific space for consumption for users every time. So usually you would need some cloud accessible data sources to
right.
reload your apps in the cloud, or you play around with Qlik Gateway. But the best approach here, if you need to move your users over and you still have some data on-prem and some maybe already accessible from the cloud system, would be to reload on-prem as much as you still need and then just publish this app for consumption to the cloud.
That's a good suggestion. I like that. All right. Next question. What about migrating our reloads and custom reloads?
Yes, the whole task list, in our case, it were the two operation
Yeah.
monitors, they will get automatically cut it over because that is all in the QSR database.
Okay. So that is part of what we did migrate.
Yes.
Great. Good to know. Okay. Next question. Can we create a mirror image of the ClickSense client managed machine as installed and working there, and then reuse it on a new machine, which is a newer version of Windows operating system or other new features?
Can you get more specific on the mirror image?
It seems like they're looking for just an exact copy of their implementation on a different operating system, maybe to test it out, I suppose.
The easiest way here would be if you take the QSR backup and
Hmm.
then you put it on this new machine to test the behavior. You can always do that. You can then just apply a license on the new machine and you would be able to use that machine.
Okay, so
Oh,
that's the real
but there's
roadblock is
no,
the license for having two machines with the same license.
exactly. There's not an automated workflow to create a mirror image of the exact installation and then put it over to another machine, you would still have to do the installation step at some point and then move the database to the other machine.
Okay. Next question. Our monitoring apps fail to reload after migration. Any tips or suggestions? That sounds like it can be complicated.
It's a good question. So let's go over the obvious points. You see, in my case, they just work. The reason here is in my data connections for monitor apps users is most likely the first one which comes up. You have a very long connection string. Localhost is the machine name I use, which works on every machine, even though I have a different host name now. You might not have specified localhost here. You might have had Qlik server 1.domain.local and the same
qualified domain name, yeah.
Down here in the proxy. You would have the same in Qlik server 1.domain.local. In that case, you would have simply to change this one to Qlik server 2 since we migrated to Qlik server 2. Then you would take this whole string, go back to the data connection, you paste it in here now, and you can hit apply. So now we changed that connection.
So that connection string in the task, that doesn't get updated with the bootstrap command.
That does not get updated because your data connections stay untouched.
Thank you. Okay, next question. How would this differ from moving from on-prem to an AWS machine?
So that would be exactly the same migration. My system here is based on VMware for this demo. So in AWS, of course, you have to spin up your machine first. But other than that, it's a Windows operating system. And then you can dig in and install Qlik Sense on it.
Okay. Next question. Is there a similar process for migrating NPrinting? I guess a lot of customers that are on-prem are certainly using NPrinting.
Let's ask the Oracle. NPrinting, this here, backing up and restoring NPrinting, that is most likely the one we want to have.
Okay.
Here are much more restrictions. NPrinting can only be restored in the exact same version. And if you wanted to migrate, you must follow the instructions on upgrading.
I'll be sure to include these links because this is good documentation. All right, we have time for one last question. Is there a different process for migrating our web connectors, QWC?
That's a good question. They worked really hard to get most of the web connectors now included inside Qlik Sense itself. So before you might have used the Qlik web connectors, a different tool than Qlik Sense, but nowadays you have the web connector list for SharePoint, Qlik Cloud Storage, S3 buckets, and Dropbox on that side. And you also can access the metadata storage from S3 buckets, for example, on the other side. And most of the BigQuery connectors and so on are now available inside the product itself.
So most of those things are actually built in now. So if you're still using web connectors, you're probably on an older system.
Or you have one specific connector which hasn't been ported yet. In this case, it's as simple as just installing up the web connectors. In any case, you have to install this one on the second system as well. It might be as simple as literally just replacing the config files. Yeah, most of the settings are stored in the deploy conf, which you can copy and replace.
Okay, great. Well, Sebastian, this has been really great. I hope this will be a good and valuable resource for people going forward when it comes time to migrate their implementation. I appreciate all the time you put into preparing this.
Thank you so much. And if there are any additional questions, feel free to reach out in the community later. I will try to answer them as good as I can.
Thank you, everyone. We hope you enjoyed this session. And thank you so much to Sebastian. We appreciate getting experts like Sebastian to share with us. Here's our legal disclaimer. And thank you once again. Have a great rest of your day.